Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 3 of Studium, an Arts and Humanities podcast. I'm John Sozek. In this episode, we'll be thinking about how training in the humanities can inform practical, everyday work in museums and gallery spaces. Specifically, we'll talk about work being done at the Barnum Museum in Bridgeport, Connecticut, a space dedicated to the work of P.T. Barnum, the versatile Connecticut native best known for his role in operating what came to be called the Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus. I'll be speaking with Kathy Maher, Executive Director at the Barnum Museum, and Albertus' own Ariana Williams, a senior BA degree candidate majoring in the humanities who interned at the Barnum Museum in the summer of 2022. Kathy and Ariana share about the manifold ways that training in the humanities has informed their work at the Barnum Museum, and our conversation ranges widely from there. We talk about how the COVID pandemic and other challenges, including tornadoes and hurricanes, have affected operations at the Barnum Museum over the past decade. Kathy and her team, we'll see, have used training in the humanities to meet these challenges in new and creative ways. We also talk more broadly about the work of museum curators today. How have curators made use of the internet and social media to reach people, as so much of our lives has moved online? And what can we expect in the next decade? As always, our aim is to see how training in the humanities hits the ground every day. What are the humanities good for? As we'll learn from talking with Kathy and Ariana, the answer is clearly quite a lot indeed. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Kathy Maher and Ariana Williams. Hi, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Studium. I'm here with Kathy Maher, the Executive Director of the Barnum Museum in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and Ariana Williams, our own Ariana Williams, a senior majoring in the humanities at Albertus Magnus College. Kathy and Ariana, welcome.
Thank you very much. Wonderful to be here.
Well, I've been looking forward very much to this conversation. I've heard so much about the Barnum Museum, both through, the usual channels, but also, Ariana, from your work there as an intern last summer, and we'll be hearing more about that. But I thought we could start off with a simple question, maybe not such a simple question. Simply, who is Phineas Taylor Barnum? Kathy, would you like to take this one for us?
I would love to. So not a simple question.
Yes.
Probably one of the most complicated and misunderstood in our contemporary society characters of 19th century America. Most people, and you can shout it out if you're watching this from your home or your dorm room, most people think of P.T. Barnum, they immediately think circus. Truth is that the circus endeavor was his retirement project. He was over 61 years old when this enterprise came to him. Interestingly, his lifelong love and passion from the time he was a very young man was his American Museum in Lower Broadway in New York City. It opened on New Year's Day, 1842. Yeah, so he is early in American history, and people just simply don't realize that.
And Kathy, he was a young man at that time, wasn't he?
He was,
in his
yes.
early 30s?
He was born in 1810.
Okay, yeah.
So he was in his early 30s, and he had, and in that early time, he ran his own newspaper in Bethel, Connecticut, in the Danbury area, sued for libel, went to jail, believed in the Constitution. Who would think this? He had a political mind. He's one of the early democratic voices in this country and really helped shape it as he goes through his life. So he was very involved in politics and believed in if you live in a place where, the popular voice controls how society moves forward, it's your obligation to have a voice in it. He believed in women's suffrage. He wrote the amendment to the Connecticut Constitution to expand citizenship. He's one of the first Republicans with Abraham Lincoln and Horace Greeley. So it goes on and on. That's why we have a museum dedicated to him.
Not a simple question.
Not a simple question. His final gift to Bridgeport is this glorious historic landmark museum in downtown Bridgeport. So it has always been a museum. People think that it was his house. It was not. He had glorious houses here in Bridgeport as well. But it has been serving as a museum since it opened in 1893.
Oh my goodness! Well, did I see right that he was the mayor of Bridgeport?
He was the mayor. He was the mayor of Bridgeport for 1 year. They were 1 year terms back then, people. Imagine that.
I'm getting a headache. Constant elections. Right?
And his platform was temperance. He was one of the country's leading temperance champions. He wanted utilities. Utilities were coming into urban centers. Everybody has access, not just the wealthy and the elite houses. Crime, those were all of his platforms. But he was also served 2 terms as a general assemblyman for Fairfield, and then he served 2 terms for Bridgeport. He pulled his gubernatorial candidacy in the 1850s because he did not believe in the expansion of slavery westward.
Wow.
So that was the Democratic platform at the time, and hence then he becomes one of the first Republicans, to abolish slavery. Yeah.
Now,
so, I'm
Kathy,
sorry, we went over.
Oh no, this is a flexible conversation.
Yeah.
Kathy and Ariana, now let's, what is your role, what are your roles respectively in relation to the museum? Now, Kathy, I know that you've been there, if I'm right, for more than 20 years. What is your role?
Next year is 25.
Oh my goodness, now.
25 years. And it has been as vibrant and ever-changing as P.T. Barnum himself. I refused the job the first time. Probably
really?
Important for some of this audience to know. I refused the job. It just didn't seem like a right fit for me where the Barnum Museum was. So this is going back to the late 1990s. My background, my training is in curatorial.
Right.
But at that moment, the museum decided to embark on a re-envisioning, and they needed a museum professional to come on and be the liaison between the designers and the museums. And I'm like, that sounds fascinating. I'll do that. And that's when I came on, really as curator and registrar and coordinator of master planning. And
sounds like you're involved in everything.
Yeah. And
that's what I'm gathering.
Yeah, and then really what happens at some smaller institutions, you kind of you cycle through directors rather fast, and we went through 4 in about 6 years, and I finally said, I'll do it myself.
Wow, that sounds like number 10 over in the UK these days.
Yeah.
My goodness. Oh, hopefully they will have a positive
better luck.
Yes.
Right. Occupant of that role, such as yourself. And Ariana, now you were there last summer for a period of many weeks. I mean, you did quite an extensive internship.
It was
What
really
was your
interesting.
role? Yeah, what kind of work did you do there?
I did a lot of helping with archiving. They just recently got a donation for a manuscript. So a lot of that was processing all that material with so many photographs and just newspaper clippings, things from that time period where it was a family that were with P.T. Barnum's circus, and they traveled with the circus and during that time. So it was interesting to see here you have a family who worked in the circus. They were with P.T. Barnum. And it just really gives it like a humanizing perspective to who he was. It really gives you an in-depth look to the time period, what was going on. And personally, I mean, circus history, that wasn't my niche. That wasn't something that I ever really thought about. But what I did know was that the Barnum Museum was a really integral part to the community and sharing that Bridgeport history, who P.T. Barnum was, and just really celebrating that. So it was really cool just to see the story being told there.
Very much. And storytelling is a big part of what I want to talk with both of you about. It seems we're talking about the Barnum Museum, but this seems like an institution that is just interwoven with the city of Bridgeport in so many ways. I'm looking forward to hearing a lot more about that. So let's hear a bit more, because our podcast here, Studium, is looking at how people with training in the arts and humanities, who have studied this in college, such as Kathy, you did, and Ariana, you're doing presently, have used that training to make a difference, right, in the world. They've gone into various fields, and they're change makers, right? So I'd love to hear more about your own training. Kathy, I know that you have studied at NYU and
Yes.
other institutions, and Ariana, you're at Albertus. Maybe Kathy, could you tell us a bit? What was your training like, and what were some highlights?
Sure. And like many 20-somethings, I wasn't quite sure of my direction, and I started volunteering, not at the Barnum Museum, at a different museum in Connecticut. Something spoke to me. I actually came, probably this is relevant, I came from a fascination of theater.
Okay.
And I
Did I
loved
see
the
costume
classics.
design? Costume design was
So
somewhere
I
in your
became interested
background.
in theater, costume design, and at my college, I was up at a SUNY, there was a collection in the costume department of period pieces that came from one of the old mansions in the town. And there was a bodice, a top. That was fascinating to me. And I said, there's something more important about this. It shouldn't just be thrown on and pushed on stage. There's meaning. And I wasn't sure what it was. Fast forward, I wound up offering myself as a volunteer to a museum in Lower Fairfield County. And they were like, you know what, we have enough help. Why don't you go over to this museum? And it was the best turn down I ever had, because it put me on
One
the right
accident
path.
after another, yeah?
And I
Just-
think that's critical for us to discuss. Don't underestimate the path.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you decide these are my goals and you stay on that course, and you don't see how roads have different opportunities, you might miss something. So off I went. Turns out I wound up applying to the NYU graduate program for costume museum studies, humanities studies.
Right.
And I spent 3 years at the Costume Institute at the Met. So that's where the entire program was. So the Metropolitan Museum of Art was my oyster. We didn't go to, one of the first things that my professor said at that time, she was like, go to the object, go to the object, go to the object. Do not rely on books, go to the artifact. And you're at the Met. We had badges that could get us into any museum on the planet at that point. And what an extraordinary opportunity. And it's always been my intention to make sure interns like Ariana or other interns that we've had to have the opportunity to immerse in the object, because that single thing, whether it's something grand or something that seems so utilitarian, it's going to speak to you. And you see enough of this, there becomes patterns, and you have to look at the patterns.
Go to the object, immerse in the object. Don't just read about something.
No.
Go to the thing
read
itself.
about it.
Well, don't just. Yeah, right.
And that's another one of your
Do your research.
Right.
Do your research. Do your research. But yeah, so I spent 3 years at the Met
Oh, it's wonderful.
going through this. And another thing is often the place where I was volunteering, very often museums like to hire within. They see the growth, the development, the enthusiasm that a volunteer or an intern has.
Yeah.
And you pull on that.
Right.
So that's where I was at that first museum in
it's
total
perfect.
about 11 years.
Right, right.
can't believe
Well,
how
I'm hearing that too. Yeah, the time,
Yeah.
right? But I'm
Yeah.
hearing that too. So getting your foot in the door, networking, getting to know people, doing
Yes.
good work in one place, other people will want you to do good work in another place. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's I'm talking to graduate colleagues out there. I had a job. It was 3 or 4 days a week. I was volunteering
Yeah,
when I
yeah.
could, a single day, doing all my classwork, and then I was splitting my time between New York and Connecticut because I lived here. But I had friends that I would stay with. So it was the most grueling, magnificent 3 years. And yeah.
I love that juxtaposition of adjectives, a grueling and magnificent. That sounds like a lot of things I find myself doing. Ariana, now you shared that you didn't, imagine yourself as a circus curator at the age of 6, right?
Right.
So your path, as Kathy has given us the term, your path led you there. What have your studies of humanities looked like, and how did you choose the humanities major? I mean, that's an exceptional choice in our time.
Yes. So I figure, so let me go back a little bit. So, like Kathy
Sure.
was saying, life takes you in different directions, different paths. And my original intention was I was going to Central Connecticut State University. I was here. And then I decided, this isn't really a good fit for me. I went ahead and I went into medical assisting because, I'm an adult. I need to figure out life, go through it, right?
Got to pay your bills,
Got to pay the
Ariana.
bills, right? But I
right.
quickly realized it just wasn't my thing. I wasn't interested in it. I didn't love it. So then I was fortunate enough. COVID happened, unfortunately, but I was fortunate enough to be able to stay home with my children and be able to really reflect on what did I want my life and career to look like. And I knew I wanted to go back to school. I knew that for sure. I had to finish what I started. So now I really looked back and I figured the humanities. And I feel like this is something that a lot of students are scared about when they think about the humanities. It's that, well, what can I do with that as a career? How can I support myself and my family off of a job that's not a defined set of skills like engineering or math or medicine? And I think it was really important to, like Kathy was saying, you got to get your feet wet. You got to get in through the door and you really got to volunteer and see what it is that's out there. And through my coursework at Albertus, a lot of what I can use in the field is reading, writing, analyzing, but also just connecting with people and just bringing all those different things together. And I also feel like I didn't want to go into a specific degree such as an undergrad in history or undergrad in art history, because with the humanities, you really get it all.
You do
Which
get it all.
I love. I love being able to
That's
pick and
right.
choose, and you get it all. And all of that is so important when you go into the field.
Into the field. Well, and Ariana, I'll tell you, that's one of the guiding principles of this space, this podcast. And people think that the humanities are a kind of passive occupation. They're not. They're among the
So many
very
things.
most active, right? If you go out, make those connections, and exercise your own creativity. Well, let's talk about some of those projects because now in my research prior to our conversation, I heard that there was a tornado. Kathy,
Yeah.
could that?
Yeah.
I bet that's been a defining feature for you.
Yeah.
I understand that and the damage to the building led to some conversations about renovation. And Ariana, I know you were involved in some of that work over this past summer. So what are the current projects? Maybe Kathy first. What are some of the current projects? What's happening day to day at the Barnum Museum?
Okay, so we are still in disaster recovery. Now, it's no fooling, I don't want to go down that long and unpleasant path. But
No, I
Rabbit
understand.
hole.
2010, the city of Bridgeport was hit with an EF1 tornado. In 11, it was Hurricane Irene, and in 2012, it was Superstorm Sandy. So it was a trifecta of major storms impacting a very damaged building. Now, going back, I've been fortunate because I've always been the curator of a significant landmark building. So the building is the most significant artifact.
Right.
Okay.
And that's on the historic register of.
It is on the National Register of Historic Places as a nationally significant site, and we are waiting for any moment the National Park Services and the Department of the Interior to acknowledge the Barnum Museum as a National Historic Landmark. That's the blue ribbon. There's only about 2,500 in the country. I've been working on it for 18 years.
You got
18
this.
years to get this.
You got this. If they're watching,
They are
I
watching.
cast my vote. Yes.
We were so close to having that completed, but when the tornado hit the building, the structural integrity was lost. So they had to take us off, right? And then, unfortunately, the Trump administration disbanded the whole program for 4 years.
Okay.
So we've been keeping at it. The program's been revived. Now we're just waiting for signatures. But when you have that kind of impact on a building, that's a museum. So it's not like you can just, okay, we got to buy new office furniture. We have 4,000-year-old mummy in the collection, silver, furniture, textiles, paintings, sculpture. It was the most massive puffback in the building that you could possibly imagine. Everything was covered with a layer of great grime. The worst thing that can happen in a museum, you have to be a scientist too, by the way. You have to understand environmental fluctuations. And the worst thing that happened was a hygroscopic shock. It was that massive relative humidity spike, kind of what my hair is going through today. But, you know, so everything is hygroscopic at a different level. So the Tom Thumb carriages, which Ariana's familiar with, so the wood swelled, but the paint didn't. So all the paint starts flaking off.
Yeah.
The HVAC system was shot, so you can't power up like the heat to extract the moisture, so everything starts molding. So anyway, and then it was 5 years of battling insurance companies. There are no graduate programs for this kind of stuff. So again, you lean in, and there were only, you know, 2 alternatives. We figure it out one step of the way, or I'm out.
Yeah.
Right? We did
this
a
is
TED
how it
Talk
hits the
on
ground.
this.
Oh, you
This
did
is
a
how it
TED
hits the
Talk.
ground.
Wow,
So
yeah, right.
again, my daily, going back to your question,
Yeah, no, of course.
what I've been doing is with my small but mighty staff is navigating this step by step, phase by phase. As a matter of fact, from the time this airs today, we have our bid opening to do the historic restoration of the exterior of the building.
Nice.
Whoa,
That's today.
wonderful.
Yeah. So as soon as we're
That's
done, that's
big.
what I jump into.
That's
So
it.
every
That's
day is filled. Best advice to give anyone: I write grants. The whole
There's a
wall over
humanities
here-
reality.
Yeah.
That's
There is a humanities
right
reality
there.
in that.
I know where you're going to go into this with Kathy. You have a whole wall full of stacks.
I have.
Oh,
where is
really?
it? Yeah, wrong way. Yeah, that
yeah.
whole wall.
Are those
It's,
grants?
Those, yeah, and not all of them. I've got a big one, but we refer to it as humanibabble. You need to write for your audience. That's when you're writing a grant.
Right.
And then I'll go up to Hartford to testify for, you know, supporting humanities. So you have to write a one-pager. You need to master the art of a one-pager and get your ask up at the top. This is your pitch, your appeal, your passion needs to be in this. But know your audience. How much are they going to have time to read and read it? So a grant is this thick. I have a grant right now that is stacked up taller than my Tinkerbell coffee cup, okay? It's massive. And as much as you have to do it alone, you have to rely, it's never a one-man show.
Yes.
You need to rely on your finance people.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
we have an assistant director who is a master's you know, of business, and I'll bring in the money, but to me, it's all make-believe. He's the one allowed to touch,
It's
you know.
working on a team, working with
as
others.
a team.
That's a big part of the humanities.
And those that you don't expect to necessarily have an important voice might be the most important voice.
Another thing, Kathy,
So-
I'm hearing from what you shared is communications. Now, at Albertus, we house our Department of Communications within the humanities.
Critical.
And we do that because, like our major in English Writing and Media, a new major this year, we're trying to emphasize just what you're saying. I got to write a one-pager, right? I got to write a gallery talk. I got to write a description of this piece.
Yeah.
These are different genres, and a person in the humanities got to have some facility able to do that. You can't say, oh, all I do is write 10-page papers. It's like, no.
No.
That's not the reality.
That becomes like, oh, it feels so good to be doing research.
Yes. What a thing.
But that skill has to be transportable to different types
Very
of
much.
instruments.
Very much.
Depending on what you know.
And I'm thinking of, Ariana, the skills that you referred to earlier, because some of the projects you were working on, so there was a particular family, I think you said, that was traveling around with the P.T. Barnum's operation, and you had to engage in a kind of storytelling, I guess, right? So you're combining this deep archival research with the weaving of a narrative.
Yeah.
Tell us more about that project that you were working on. It sounds really important.
Yeah, it was really being able to identify what was the key information and
Yes.
looking at the details. There's a lot of details in a lot of this stuff when you're going through researching, and it's more than just going on Google and figuring out what you can find. You really got to dig deep. Um,
Yes.
and it's also very a specific kind of storytelling too, because you want to make sure that what the information that you are writing down is coherent, it makes sense, and it's
Yeah.
something that a person can pick up and read and say, "Oh, I understand the story. I understand what they're trying to convey, and why is it important?" I think that's the biggest
Yeah.
thing at the end of the day is, well, why is this information about this family so important and
Mm-hmm.
relevant to today? And it's really
Mm-hmm.
building on that and showing that, hey, like we are connected throughout no matter
Yeah.
what time period, and taking the skills from Albertus too. Like I know communications is a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
Writing, that's huge. And I know
Mm-hmm.
it's like the
Mm-hmm.
research paper, that's fun. You're picking a topic and you're going into it, but
Yeah.
those are really important skills. And you
Right.
need that
Right.
in order to be able to succeed. And even like Kathy was saying,
Right.
with your team, being able to communicate effectively with your team and being able to say, hey, I need help with this.
Yep.
Hey, I need a little bit more information on this piece so I'm able to do my job, and being able to really assess what is the mission for the particular place that you're working at and working
Right.
together to achieve that.
Right. And
Mm-hmm.
something a person can pick up and read. Something a person can pick
Yeah.
up and read. So that says to
Understand.
me that you're, and understand. So that says to me we're thinking about our audience.
Mm-hmm.
Who are we talking to? So when we write a paper in the
Yeah.
humanities, it's not just shooting off into the ether, the great repository of thought, right? I mean, it's something that's intended. And so, one thing I wanted to make sure that we get to in our conversation here is thinking about online venues for the
Mm-hmm.
presentation of this, and reaching folks who are not either able or for whatever reason inclined, they're busy, they're far away, to physically come into the building, because the preservation and enhancement of the building is vital, obviously, for
Mm-hmm.
many reasons. But these days, I mean, I don't know, just a layman's opinion, it seems to me people are more often looking online initially, right? And then they'll decide if they want to make the trip in on
Mm-hmm.
that base. So maybe Ariana, first on this one, because I know that you're telling the story, you're doing this research, and you're also working somehow with a presentation of this online, I think, or at least that was some part of the work you were doing. Is that right?
So some of the information that I was looking up, I was heading over and I was giving it over to Adrian, the curator at the Barnum Museum. So
Right, right, right,
I
right,
was able to do the research and the work for her, so that way she was able to go ahead and type up the rest of the narrative, so that way it's all
right.
documented within the manuscript. And
So you're
then
producing the content, and then
right,
Adrian is delivering that in some
yes,
way, or seeing to the
yes,
delivery of that.
right, because her job as the curator was to create that narrative and that story for the material that was
Right.
recently donated. Right?
Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, combing through those archives, you can't comb through the archives and craft the narrative. This is why we have teams, right?
Right.
This
You need a
is
team. Yes.
realistically.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
I'll add
Kathy, what's
to
been going on, please?
I'm sorry. I'll add to
Not at
that.
all. No.
Under Ariana is probably being a little humble here because you need a very, very
Characteristically,
accurate.
yes.
Yes, and even Adrian said that there was such wonderful precision that she didn't have to worry about the work and the detail that was
Yeah.
necessary to these documents being developed. Because as a curator, you understand the broader scope of history. So whatever might be relevant to a time period would speak to expand the story that we're trying to develop with this particular collection. That's the truth of any artifact, really. But Adrian can then take what Ariana has done, and then it gets uploaded into the Connecticut Digital Archive, our collective access platform. So there's multiple layers. People think it's, you take a picture of it, and write a little description, and it's done. It's so not.
No.
There's metadata. There's there's a technical proficiency that needs to go along with every single object in the
Right,
collection.
and
It's
that's true.
it's tens of thousands of objects.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's tens of thousands of objects.
This is why we need a team.
Yeah.
This is why you need a team and
How-
everybody
working together.
working
Yeah.
together.
How, Kathy, does the Barnum Museum use online venues? What kind of technology has been useful in
So-
your effort to share this collection?
So one thing that after the tornado, Adrian is a product of the tornado, our curator, because at that point I was serving as director and curator. It was impossible to do that. I needed to focus on the building, and Adrian and I had known each other for many years. She was in another organization. It's like, hey, I got a great deal for you. We got this tornado. But I knew her level of expertise and training that I could trust her to own the collection's disaster recovery. Yes. And one thing that we all agreed we needed to do was to find a way to digitize the collection. Now, a couple of federal platforms, the Institute of Museum and Library Services and the National Archives, not the National Archives, the National Endowment for Humanities, have programs you can get funding for, again, very sophisticated grants, to really take the Barnum Museum collection, and we partnered with the Bridgeport Public Library Historical Collection.
Oh, good.
And created a digitization program. And we brought in the skills we needed, the catalogers, the metadata people, the professional photographer that could photograph three-dimensional artifacts. Many times when people say you're digitizing, it's like you're taking a piece of paper, you're turning it over, not when you have polished silver, or costume, because it's three-dimensional. So that was very new for the National Endowment, and if anybody is inclined to see that grant, it's actually one of the sample grants on the National Endowment for Humanities website.
Oh, good. That's a vote of confidence. That's nice.
Well, and it's also sharing.
Yes.
You know, you're learning from colleague organizations because so many organizations are in this position of needing to digitize the collections. Yes. So when COVID hit, we were already in disaster mitigation mode. So we had, it all got fed up to the Connecticut Digital Archive. So our collection was accessible, that we could create programs and do work while lockdown marched forward. Yeah. So that became a really vital piece. And that digital archive has also helped us during COVID in particular. We really launched our YouTube channel.
Oh, yes.
We
pandemic drove that, didn't it? I think the pandemic drove the creation of this podcast.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's one of the unexpected benefits of that time period in our history. We didn't do it right away. I'm going to point out, the first thing we had to do is focus on the finances because it was chaos. And when you have a small staff, everybody's got to, everybody's in the boat rowing in the same direction.
Right.
So it wasn't until about August, lockdown happened into March, August, that we were ready to create the programs. And not just do one-offs. A lot of organizations rushed to do programming online, and then it was gone. Yeah. So with YouTube, it's there and the audience grows. So, we're small, but we've got about 2,500 subscribers at this point. We're closing on 350,000 views. I mean, So people are watching and it's growing. And even though it's a virtual audience, it's an audience.
Exactly.
And Kathy, we will put that link in the description.
Oh, thank you. And you look at the analytics. Google has incredible analytics, so you could really see, going back to your audience, who are we serving? What are they interested in? And then even what we're doing at the museum, going back to your audience question, this isn't the Kathy show. Again, we've had focus groups with families, with teachers, with business representatives, with community friends and families, a listening session where over 100 people in the community, because at the end of the day, who are you building this for, right? Who are you doing, whether it's virtual or on-site, you need to answer to those people. So again, it's bringing all the voices to the table.
Yes. Yep. And I'm hearing that that's a big part. We're talking about the arts and humanities, building those networks, building those relationships. Kathy, would you say that the YouTube channel has been the Barnum Museum's primary mode of contact with folks on the internet?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been our bloodline because we're a construction site.
Right, at present.
And it's just not safe to have a portion of the building open with construction workers and scaffolding is coming. It's tricky to deal with COVID fallout. We're going to be storing some materials in the building. Nothing fancy like tile, but it's stuff. The idea of opening for a small period of time and then we'd be closing again, then it becomes optics. It confuses the audience. It's like, well, you were just open.
Yeah.
It's like you're not open again. What's going on?
The consistency,
So it's been a delicate balance of figuring out how do we stay relevant?
Yeah.
How do we serve people? And then we've since hired a wonderful digital educator recently who is rolling out the school programs because you're not allowed into school so much anymore and they're not coming out.
Right. And now,
so we've using Flipgrid and ThingLink to develop programs.
Interesting. Flipgrid. Yeah, we used that in some of our classes at the college. Now, okay, so the YouTube channel is kind of in the restaurant metaphor, that's the front end, right? So people are encountering the YouTube channel. But you referred to an archive, the Connecticut archive as well. And Ariana, I think you were preparing content that would inform what happens on the YouTube channel, but there was a more kind of formal digital repository. Is that right? What is that about and how does that look?
So in the state of Connecticut, the Connecticut Digital Archive is the Connecticut Digital Archive, so CTDA, really is an incubator for multiple museums. I don't know how many. Do you remember, Ariana, how many museums
I don't remember, but I know it was a lot.
It's a lot. The State Museum, there's multiple museums in the state.
What a resource.
It's a fabulous resource.
Can people access that? Could our listeners access that?
Absolutely. If you even go into the Barnum Museum.
Link in the description.
Link in the description, yes. It's on our website. You can click on it and you can see, I think we've got about 1,500 artifacts up already. We are linking our, with all the photography that we did, every time Adrian does her Curious People Wanted YouTube program. Because our YouTube is just, there are actually programs with episodes. And Adrian will do Curious People Wanted, and it will highlight an artifact every couple of weeks, depending on its schedule, and you can access right to the digital archive to get more in-depth information. You can get the accession number, you can get, the medium, the dimensions, everything that's...
Right, and the collection of that information, Ariana, is what you were doing.
Yes.
So there is, as we forget, again, the front end, back end.
Yeah.
So there's this shiny, accessible front end, whether it's YouTube or the Connecticut Digital Archive, and then there's this grinding, coffee-driven, endless clicking on obscure things that lies behind it.
Yes. But it's fun.
Well, it is fun.
It really is, though. I know it sounds daunting and it sounds, grueling, grinding, but in reality, when you're doing it, you really are having a fun time documenting it, and because what you're doing is so important. You're given the longevity of the artifact, preserving it online, making it more accessible. I just remember, growing up, you had to go to the museum in person to see something. Yes. And I just think it's so amazing how digital humanities is really becoming such a thing, and how just the accessibility is so important. And I think it's great.
Yeah.
Ariana, just in passing, I'd be curious to hear more about that, because I feel like in the humanities, we have the sense that we're always in seminars or discussing or something. Yeah. But, we're a lot like research scientists. In Germany, these are the human sciences after all, right? And so if you're sitting there for 10 hours in a lab, running, I don't know, centrifuges or something, that's very similar to what you were doing over the summer. This is the real on-the-ground back-end work. Yeah. What do you find so interesting about it? Because yes, certainly you're aware that you're contributing to a valuable effort, but it seemed to me from our conversations that there was something intrinsic, right? That you just liked combing through old stuff.
I do. Yeah, I really do. My husband thinks I'm a weirdo.
Of course.
I don't know what it is about me, but I just find that just having that knowledge and having all of that historical context behind it, I just think it's so important. Growing up, my father always used to say, you can't know about your future, where to go in your future, if you don't know your past. where you come from, what's the history. And I think it's just so important. And there's always a story behind everything. Why do people keep things in the attic, keep things holding into their basement? It's just so much fun. I don't know what it is about going through old things, and I know people who probably think, well, why is this important now? But it is. There's such an importance to these things.
Right.
Yeah.
Stories inside stories inside stories.
Yeah.
It's like those Russian dolls, right?
Well, yes.
Surprise.
That's another one.
Maybe it's like an onion. Now we'll get
Yeah.
philosophical. So
And
we're-
it's true, exactly
Kathy,
what she said. It's like to understand one thing, you have to understand
Everything.
a broad scope of things. Because history is messy,
Yeah.
and the influences on any moment in time, big or small, happen as a result of multiple events or people, or so it's really a matter of keeping things up. And it doesn't matter if it's a photograph, if it's a costume, if it's furniture.
Yeah.
The Crimea War affected all kinds of design.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. And you might not even think of that. You're
Yeah.
just looking at a
No.
picture or a chair or
Exactly.
something like that.
Exactly. Same with the Civil War. I mean, the Civil War in
White.
America affected everything industrially created and the advancements. So, to understand what was happening in communities, not just on the battlefields.
Yes.
You lose your entire community because an entire community would march off.
Yeah.
It's leaving women and children with no, this is an example, with no means of making their own living. So all of a sudden women had to find ways, because if somebody was killed or imprisoned, there was no subsidy like there is today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
right.
we've benefited from the struggles of the past, and that's
Well,
important to know when we look back.
Very much. And we're reminded, Ariana, of the wisdom of your choice of major, because here we have history, we have art,
Yep.
we have literature and writing, English, this kind of thing. We have research skills.
Religion. Yeah. It's so important.
Even.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, thank you. That happens to be my own. So, friends, why don't we take a look ahead a bit? What's coming up, right? What's on the horizon? And how do you anticipate that, you're going to keep using your training in the humanities and your on-the-ground experience, right, to continue your projects? Now, Kathy, in your case, this is going to be related, I'm sure, to the Barnum Museum in some way. And Ariana, you're looking ahead at curatorial work more broadly. So maybe, Kathy, what's actually on the horizon for the Barnum Museum?
Well, for us, we're at the point now is the interior construction, the exterior construction is starting. We're in the process of fundraising for the interior design.
Right.
Okay, because at the end of the day, you have a fixed building. People have to step in it and step into an immersive story about P.T. Barnum, okay, and how he's influenced. So that was a tall order. Relevant to humanities and unexpected paths, we knew we needed master storytellers that could tell Barnum's extraordinary story in a modern way. And we've been working with a firm called BRC Imagination Arts. They're out of California. Most of them, including the principal, Bob Rogers, are all former Disney Imagineers.
Oh, my goodness. Really?
Yeah.
Because they're technical wizards, right? They understand, because in a Barnum story, we know that people going to a museum, the hang time, this is all the technical stuff that you don't necessarily think of. Not everybody wants to spend 3 hours in a museum and read every bit of label copy. There are scientific studies on how long people will stay at any one thing. And we knew if we're telling a Barnum Museum story, we've got to modernize. It can't be about an object with label copy with a lid over it. It needed to be an immersive experience. So we've been working with BRC Imagination Arts. So when you come to the Barnum Museum, when it's done, you will be transported.
Which I most certainly will do, yes.
Yeah.
There's nothing like this. BRC actually did the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Museum in Springfield, Illinois. And it's probably about 10 years ago now that they did that. but it was groundbreaking at the time.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, so you walk through the lesser known stories, and you lean into the hard stories because that makes you step back, and somebody's historic story then can become relatable.
Yes.
Yes.
You know, in a modern context.
And the challenge of building a team, as you pointed out earlier, in relation to the Reconstruction efforts there, in the same way, when you're telling a story, you need to build a team. You need the master storytellers.
Right. So in our case,
Yes.
we need the master storytellers, we need the artists, we need the engineers. Everybody's at the table. You know, because if you have to turn this vision into a reality, you need the architects and the engineers to say that's impossible.
Yep. Yes. Right, because our degrees are in theory, so we need to bring folks in, and you need to have the skills to bring those folks in a way that really emphasizes their talents and
Absolutely
and creates a team.
And the scholarship, you know, the team of Barnum historians as well as 19th century historians, whatever it is, whether it's circus history, animal rights history in our case, bring everybody to the table so the voice is coming from a collective, and then the story follows you through that. And you don't necessarily have to always leave a museum, that was lovely, that was so exciting. You could leave, it's like, wow, I didn't know that. Moved, changed some way.
Right.
You leave, the Barnum Museum, any museum plus.
So a
And
collective,
that's our job.
Oh my goodness. So a collective effort about a truly singular man.
Exactly.
Yes?
And I speak every year at Florida University. It's I got to say it right, it's a practice and themed environment integration program. And they're not all just humanities. There are humanities scholars, there's interior designers in that class, there are spatial engineers. So humanities touches robotics, gaming.
Yeah.
There we go.
Nobody thinks of gaming.
There we go.
You look at some of these fantastic games, it's all coming from something, very often historic, modernized historic, something that we in our human journey is relatable.
Yeah.
So even, game design.
Yep.
And just to say in passing, and then Ariana, I want to go to you and we can wrap up. We've made the decision recently to house our computer and game arts program in the art department rather than the computer CIS department because we're telling stories, we're creating art, right?
Yes.
And so and that's an unusual decision, I understand, from Professor Gangwish, who's leading up that program. But,
It's not as unusual as you think.
Yeah.
It is happening in other places. Because I go down to, Barnum is in the Hall of Fame of what's called IAPA. It's the International Association of Amusement Parks and Attractions.
Okay.
50,000 people from all over the world come to this.
Wow.
And that is becoming a movement.
Wow. I'd like to think we're on the cutting edge of this as all things, right? We're slicing into history.
But that's global. So, bravo to you for recognizing it and moving in that direction.
Bravo to Professor Gangwish, among many others. Ariana, so what about, I will, Ariana, what about your own next step? So you're a senior.
Yeah.
So you're looking ahead. And you're thinking about curatorial work.
Yes.
How are you going to take your experience at the Barnum Museum and forward? And what do you see as your next steps?
So I think I really want to hit the floor running. I really do. I just want to get out there and I want to find and get my feet wet, maybe becoming a curatorial assistant, getting some background knowledge in that. I feel like the experience and the skills that I gained at the Barnum Museum so helpful because not only did it expose me to different types of professions within the world of museums, but also they're all different, but they all connect. So I feel like curatorial work, possibly educator, going into that, telling a story, connecting with the public, working with the public, it's so important.
Right.
But definitely want to pursue higher education, keep digging into it. Possibly pick what kind of history or art history I kind of want to focus on. Maybe become an expert. We'll see there.
Oh, I don't doubt that.
Yeah,
You'll
very
become an
excited.
expert. Oh, wonderful.
But
Well,
yeah.
it has been such a pleasure to get to speak with both of you. Thank you so much. Kathy Maher, Executive Director of the Barnum Museum in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and Ariana Williams, a senior majoring in humanities at Albertus Magnus College. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank you so
you.
much. It was wonderful. And anybody who ever wants to reach out to us, absolutely welcome.
Yes. Yeah,
Quite
this was
so.
great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ariana. Well, thank you both. And links in the description, friends. Links in the description. Thank you so much. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.